Hello, welcome to another episode of the AW Confidential Podcast. Today we have another amazing guest. She is a Lovecon expert and a two-time Emmy Award winning journalist, Benita Alexander. And I can't do it justice. First of all, welcome to our
Thank
show. I'm so
you.
excited
Thank
to
you.
have you.
I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Mm. Your story is, I mean, it just got to me from the moment that I heard it. And I have interviewed you before.
Yes.
So I am just flattered to have you here and have you share your story again.
Thank you.
So your story has been told dozens, probably more than dozens of
All over the
times.
world. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I saw you on Dr. Oz. You've been on a 2020 special. You have been on multiple TV shows,
Yeah.
and I can't do it justice. So, for the listeners that are not familiar with your story, it's a love story. I would say it's a love story gone horribly wrong. Can
Yeah.
you tell us about the man, the story, the story and what he did?
In a nutshell, it started out as a beautiful love story and it turned into an absolute nightmare. Basically I was engaged to this man who was kind of like Mr. Perfect, Mr. Prince Charming, which I guess in hindsight should have been my first clue, but he was this world famous doctor and scientist, and he was literally like the perfect man. I mean, he did everything right. He was charming, he was sexy, he was romantic, he was intelligent, he was worldly, sophisticated. He spoke like 7 languages. He was doing this groundbreaking radical surgery and wanted to help mankind and the future of medicine, and seemed to be so caring and altruistic and genuine. He was really generous with my friends, my family, my daughter. He just checked, if you had a list, it was like check, check,
Checked all
check,
the
check, check.
boxes.
There was like nothing wrong. And we were head over heels in love, and he spoiled the hell out of me and took me on all these romantic trips. It was like romance on steroids. And I was kind of floating on cloud 9. I mean, I was blissfully happy. You could see it. And everybody that knew me was jealous. Like even my male friends, my gay friends, everybody was like, we want what you have, like,
Wow.
where do we find one of him? But it turned out that he was like a pathological con man and was literally lying about everything. I mean, it was so shocking. It's still 7 years later, it's still shocking.
And I sort of want to get into just a little bit about how far this con went. I mean,
Yeah.
you literally sent out invitations. You thought you were going to be married by the Pope. I mean, it really did go just
Oh, it went crazy.
far.
It went crazy, crazy far. I mean, it's kind of takes a lot of explanation, but because of who he was this world-renowned doctor and scientist. He worked at the place in Sweden that gives the awards the Nobel Prize in Medicine. Very prestigious. His nickname was the super surgeon. I mean, this guy had accolades coming out of his, everywhere. He was the super surgeon. And long story, but he had all these connections and he wanted a big Catholic wedding. I'm not Catholic. He told me he was the Pope's private personal doctor, which on the one hand sounds a little crazy, but not really, because he was this famous cardiothoracic surgeon. He's from Italy. He had shown me paperwork where it talked about the work he'd done at the Vatican. And if anyone was going to be the Pope's personal doctor, it made sense that he was. And so then it was like this, it was a long kind of build up to the thing, but he kept saying he wants this big Catholic wedding, but because I thought we were both divorced, he couldn't find a priest supposedly that would marry us. And so he went to the Vatican to ask for help finding a priest that would marry us. And fast forward, he comes out of this meeting and he basically says to me, "You're not going to believe this. The Pope offered to marry us himself." And I was like, bullshit, like, come on. I mean, I didn't believe him, but it turns out the Pope actually does marry people sometimes. And the way he presented it was that the Pope wanted to do this as a favor to him for the work he'd done for the Vatican, and that we were kind of the perfect poster couple to kind of help him push the church forward. So it wasn't as crazy as it sounds, but so then it was the Pope. And then because the Pope was marrying us, all these celebrities were coming. I'm talking like world leaders, and it was nuts. Like Andrea Bocelli was supposed to be singing as I walked down the aisle, and John Legend was playing. And it was, I felt like Princess Diana or something. It was kind of like the wedding of the century, but he took it so far that invitations went out to all these people. We had 300 plus guests coming from all over the world who had booked tickets, booked hotels, purchased like fancy, expensive black tire, gowns and attire, because it was like a whole weekend of events. He let it go that far. He let me quit my job, a job I'd had for 17 years. He let me pull my daughter out of her very difficult to get into private school, because we were supposed to be moving to Barcelona to his house after the wedding. He let all these things happen. And then 6 weeks, literally 6 weeks before the wedding, thank God, I luckily found out that everything was a lie. And it took a while to piece it all together, but literally everything was a lie. The whole wedding was some big sick fantasy. Nothing about it was true. Nothing was booked. Nothing. There never was going to be any wedding. He took all these invitations that he said he was hand delivering. I don't know what garbage truck they ended up in, but they never got delivered. And these were like really beautiful, expensive invitations. I spent like $50,000 of my own money on the invitations, on dresses, because I needed these fancy couture dresses. He told me he was divorced. He wasn't divorced. He was still divorced, never could have legally married me in the first place. And everything about the wedding is a lie. He doesn't even know the Pope. He doesn't know any of these celebrities. And then the killer was, I went on an investigative mission to try and unravel all his lies in the house in Barcelona, where we were supposed to be moving, where I had already quit my job, pulled my daughter out of her school, where he sat in front of my daughter, sat in front of her and talked about the school he was enrolling her in Barcelona and the life she was going to live in Barcelona. In this house in Barcelona, he was hiding a whole third family, another woman, a third family with 2 little kids. So it was just nuts. And then I found out there was another woman. Who knows how many women there are. So on a personal level, the lies were just, I don't know. I didn't even know what word to use, but yeah, astonishing, so crazy. But then, and it clicked in very quickly for me, as devastated as I was, which I was, my whole life just got railroaded. I mean, I gave up everything for this man, and I was never somebody that would do that. I'm very, very career oriented, very successful career. Never in a million years. If you told me I was going to walk away from a job for a man, I would have been like, yeah, you're crazy.
But it's crazy because, people would say, well, she's intelligent, she's accomplished, she's beautiful, and she believed this. And, I think it isn't that hard to be conned to this magnitude, because he was a world-renowned surgeon, and, he had a lot of the things to back up what he was saying. Oh, yeah. So, as gut-wrenching and as devastating as this experience has been, I'm sure that it's made you wiser, stronger, and it's turned you into a Lovecon expert. So what I want you to talk about a little bit is, what is a Lovecon expert?
Well, so what happened is I ended up going public with a story because it's really humiliating, right? And it's really embarrassing. On top of all the heartbreak and devastation of all the loss and all the lies, it's embarrassing to be, hey, I just got conned, and I'm a journalist, and I'm kind of like the last person on the planet that should have gotten duped, and I just got duped. And I kind of wanted to crawl under my bed and stay there. But I was really worried because I thought, this man is a world-renowned doctor and surgeon and scientist. He has people's lives in his hands. And if he's telling me these absurd, ridiculous lies so convincingly, there's no way he's not lying in his professional life. And that was so terrifying to me, because that literally meant people could be dying. Mm-hmm. And so I felt an obligation to go public and tell my story. I thought I might be the only person that had all the information and had the means to expose him. And so I ended up going public with just that goal in mind, just to expose him and let people know who this guy really was. And then what I wasn't expecting, though, was after I went public, I got contacted by women from all over the world, and they were thanking me, and they were calling me brave, which was a huge compliment. And I didn't really feel brave at the time, because it's really hard to go public about something so personal. But basically the message was, you're making me feel less alone. You're making me feel less stupid. Something similar, maybe not as nuts, happened to me. And I haven't been able to talk about it because I feel so embarrassed and so humiliated. And so many of these messages were coming in that I realized, wow, like, I really need to do something about this. I need to talk about this. We need to talk about this. We need to support each other. And so it wasn't expected. It kind of morphed into this whole other mission of talking about it and trying to help other women, because I don't want anyone to be shamed into silence.
And first of all, thank you for that, because I know how difficult it is to open your life up, just to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And there are so many women being conned, and maybe
Yep.
not to that extreme, but
Right.
even, things like, women giving men money,
Yep.
allowing them access to their finances. So I'm really glad that you're opening, people's eyes, because it's devastating, and it
It
can be
really is.
devastating
Yeah.
mentally, emotionally, financially,
Every
and
way.
absolutely. Now, they say love is blind. I do believe love is blind. And, when I hear your story or similar stories, I think about, there was a time in my life when I was dating, and, I had a relationship with a man who happened to have a double life. And the crazy thing about it is, you know, there was something always eating at me. Something didn't
Mm.
feel right. I had never visited his house. I had never met his friends. They
Yeah.
were just little things, but for me, I think ignorance was bliss, and I sort of ignored those little,
Mhm.
you know, they're they're red flags.
Yep.
Let's be real. They're red flags. So, during your relationship, at any point, did you feel the way I felt, like something was off, like something didn't fit?
I think so, and this is a tricky question because I think it's much easier in hindsight. It's like kind of like Monday morning quarterbacking and 2020 hindsight to go back. But yes, there were little red flags. And I think what happens is, sorry, first of all, they are really, really skilled manipulators, right? And all we're doing is falling in love and wanting to be loved, which is not a crime, to want to be loved and to want to trust the person you love. But they from the beginning, and this is important, a love con is different from someone who just cheats on you. And someone who just cheating happens all the time, unfortunately, and relationships break down for various reasons, and people cheat, have affairs, which is not pleasant and is ugly and for everybody involved. But a love con is very different, because a love con is somebody that enters the relationship with nefarious intentions. They know from day one that they're going to lie to you. They know from day one, as they're looking you in the face and love bombing you and telling you how much they love you, that they are going to take something from you, or they have some kind of ulterior motive. It's really no different than a criminal. They walk into the relationship with bad intentions, and that distinguishes it from an affair or cheating and the disintegration of a relationship that results in those kind of things. This is very nefarious and really no different than any other kind of criminal. And they tend to, I always tell women to beware if you're vulnerable, right? Like, it could be anything. You could have just come out of a relationship or divorce or lost a job, lost a loved one, anything. But when you're vulnerable, you're kind of like prime target for these guys. They have what I call a vulnerability radar. They zoom in, and they know, and because we are vulnerable and because we want to be loved, we don't necessarily see the red flags. And also they love bomb you. They're so manipulative and they bombard you. And so that little thing in your gut that pops up, we don't pay attention, and it's very hard to do it in the moment. But yeah, same thing, like the house in Barcelona where he was hiding this other family, the man flew me all over the world, beautiful trips all over the world, so many different countries, never took me to the house in Barcelona. And every single time we were supposed to go, the trip got conveniently canceled at the last minute. I have an emergency surgery. And at the very end, we were arguing about this like crazy. So I'm like, who the hell marries a man without seeing the house where they're going to live? And that was a huge red flag. And that's one of the things I tell women all the time. When you're dating somebody, you have to see where they live. You have to see their home surroundings. And if they will not let you, huge red flag. Something's wrong.
Absolutely. Oh, and it, like you said, in hindsight, I think I should have known better. But
yeah,
love really is, I don't know.
It is blind, but also this sort of gets to the heart of my message, because we beat ourselves up, right? So we go back and like, oh, I should have known better. I should have done this. We beat ourselves up. And that's what I don't want women to do. I want women to be aware, and to make smart choices, and to be aware that this can happen, and to be careful when we're vulnerable. But it's not our fault. It wasn't your fault. These guys are master manipulators, and all kinds of things come into play, gaslighting and mental manipulation. And they're sociopaths, a lot of them. And it's very calculated, and nobody, we're just like loving women that, want to open our hearts up.
But, one of the things that I have learned is that with every painful experience, no matter how painful, there are lessons.
Yes.
And I'm sure you would agree.
Yes.
Now, if you can find, well, just in general, I think if we can find the lessons, it almost makes it worth it. It's almost like, I went through this pain, but I learned something. So
Yes.
What has been the biggest lesson that this experience taught you?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Thank you.
I guess one of the lessons is I'm way stronger than I ever knew or ever believed. Because I didn't fall apart. I wanted to crawl under the bed and hide, and I didn't. And going public has not been easy. It's funny because all the internet trolls, and we talk about this on my podcast, you get attacked for so many ridiculous things. And I'm like, do you think going public and airing your personal life in such personal detail and raising your hand and saying, hey, I got conned is fun? No, trust me, I'd much rather not. But I've learned to withstand all that. And it's given me this purpose and this mission this path that I never would have imagined that I would be on, in helping to empower other women. And that is so rewarding to me, and so much more fulfilling, really, in a way than any of the other work I'd ever done, before. And so I feel like maybe this happened to me for a reason, and maybe it did happen to me because I did have whatever it is, the strength or the guts to stand up to him and to talk about it and to keep talking about it and to kind of fight back and to show other women that you can survive this. I mean, really, I know it feels like you can't, but you can. Like, I promise you can. And so in a weird way, I'm grateful for that, as horrible as it was. In a weird way, I'm actually grateful that it happened to me.
I know exactly what you're referring to. So, I'm sure that there are things that women can do to protect themselves. Are they guaranteed to, not allow you to fall into this trap? Probably not, because when it comes to the heart, I think guarantees are really difficult. But what are some of the things that women can do to protect themselves, or any signs to look for?
Number one, as I was saying, if you're vulnerable, you have to be hyper vigilant. You have to protect yourself, because that's when things are going to happen. That's when this kind of person has the potential to kind of swoop in and, sweep you off your feet. And you just don't even realize what's happening because you're so vulnerable. And you just basically, at that point, you just want somebody to wrap their arms around you and love you and tell you that everything's okay. And they know that, and they take advantage of that. And then on a practical level, a couple of things. Number one, when you're dating somebody, you have to Google the person and do your research. And sometimes we feel like we don't want to do that. We're intruding. Oh, I trust him. That would be weird. I wouldn't want someone to Google me. I'm sorry.
I
Do
have a
it.
19-year-old and I tell her, when you date someone, you Google that person.
Do it, because
Absolutely.
everybody has something about them on the internet. So if you Google the person and you find nothing, okay, that's a red flag. Okay. And so that's something you have to do. And then look out for things like we were saying. If the person will not let you see their home surroundings, will not let you meet their friends, something's not right. It may not be as terrible as the thing I went through, or being completely lied to, but something's not right. The other thing that they do is they tend to kind of extract information from you. They'll ask you tons of questions. They want to know everything about you. And the reason they do that is because they twist that and they use that against you, but they don't really let you in. You know enough about them, but when you really think about it, they don't give you all the deep down inside information. That's a big red flag.
Wow. It's really amazing because this happens, I think, more often than not. I just don't think that everyone talks about it,
No,
but I do think it happens.
I think that's one of the things I've been astonished by. And actually, it's upsetting actually how often this happens. So many people reach out to me, and the fact that it is happening as often as it happens is disturbing. And a lot of the women that reach out to me, and they have very legitimate reasons for not being able to talk. I mean, there are children involved, families involved, or they're afraid, quite frankly. And there are good reasons that not every woman can speak up, but when we can, I think it's important to, because we really need, I think, to somehow eradicate this idea that we need to crawl up into a ball and be humiliated and be embarrassed, and that a smart, successful woman shouldn't get duped and shouldn't talk about it and should be shamed into silence, because anyone can get duped.
We're human.
Anyone can get duped. We're just human, and we just opened up our hearts, and unfortunately these con artists kind of have no heart, and they don't care who they hurt. They have no empathy. They don't think like we do. They don't feel like we do. They're kind of actors, they have no empathy. They have no remorse. And that's also one of the hardest things about being conned, is trying to understand, the person, because how could somebody do that? But that's kind of a waste of time, because they just don't think the same way we do. They don't care. As twisted and sick as that is, they just don't care.
I think that's, something important to point out. Sometimes we try and, it's almost like we want to rationalize the hurt, or, the person that's hurting us. Just some things don't have an explanation.
Or an answer.
It's really, I appreciate you as a woman, that you're speaking out and you're sharing your story. I think one of the best way for us to empower one another is by supporting each other and sharing our stories. And we can learn so much. So instead of, maybe kicking someone when they're down, you can, lift them up. I think that's something that you're doing, with this story, with your life. And I appreciate that.
Thank you too. And I think that's what this is, that's what this is about. It's like, and it kind of defies logic to me, right? Why do women kick each other down and knock each other down? I mean, if we would just embrace each other and support each other, we all make mistakes. We all have faults, we're all learning as we go through this. And why not just embrace each other? We're going to go a whole lot further if we do that.
I know. So one of the things that I like to do with every interview is end it with something positive, because I think sometimes the conversations get a little, I don't know, intense, heavy. So I'd like to ask you, and you can take a second, but what are the 2 positive takeaways that you hope our listeners will walk away with after listening to this episode? Positive.
Number one, that you absolutely unequivocally can survive this. And not only survive it if you've been conned or duped or hurt by someone, you can survive it and be stronger, and be better than ever, and find something in you that maybe you didn't know you had before, and be braver and stronger and just better for it. And I think women are so much more resilient than they give themselves credit for. And sometimes we have to kind of get knocked sideways a little bit before we can really rise up as the queens that we are.
Absolutely.
So that's one thing. And the other thing is to, look, I went through this horrible experience, which is really crazy. And people ask me all the time, how do you trust anyone? Or how do you, but the thing is, I still believe in love, very, very much so. And I'm still a diehard, hopeless romantic. I have not given up on love. And I don't want anyone to give up on love. Love is a beautiful thing. I mean, what is there really in the world without love, right? So keep loving. Just keep your eyes open.
I love that message. I'm so glad you said it, because I think sometimes when we get hurt in any way, we sort of want to pull back from the world, from feeling again. And a lot of times we numb ourselves, and I don't think that's the answer either.
I don't either.
So I so appreciate you, and I'm so happy that you shared your story on this platform, because it's going to help a lot of women. And I am certain that a lot of listeners will want to find out more about you. And how can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram. It's at Loveconned, which is LOVECONNED. And I now have my first podcast on YouTube too, called Benita and the Baracas, which is a beautiful word. If I can just, Baraca is this Colombian slang term, which I discovered on a trip to Colombia last year. And it stands for a resilient woman who's been through something difficult, yet still stands strong. And I love this word so much. And it was so weird how this happened, because I was on vacation in Colombia and I happened to go to this restaurant. It was called Baraca's Deli. And I asked it was all women running the restaurant. And I asked, why is it called this? And what does it mean? And when they told me that, I was like, wow, you have to be kidding me. This so fits, my life. And so Benita and the Baracas, the podcast, is on YouTube. I'd love you to watch, and I will be talking more about my own story, but also talking to other women, sharing their stories about, what happened to them, how they got conned, and how they survived. It's all about, the theme is all about badass women. I'm all about supporting badass women.
I love it. And listeners, all you have to do is type in Benita Alexander and you will find her story and empathize with it as much as I did. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate you.
And I appreciate you. Thanks for what you're doing. And that's another thing I would say, that I have met some of the most beautiful people as a result of this. Some of my dearest friends now, I would never have met if this thing didn't happen to me. And people like you and women like you who are all about supporting other women and empowering other women and positive messages. And so there's a lot of beauty on the other side of the heartache, I promise.
Oh, you're amazing. You're beautiful.
Thank you.
Exactly the way you are. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the AW Confidential Podcast. Talk to you soon.